Good morning, afternoon, evening, whenever you're listening to this. I'm your host, Leafy Potato, and welcome to another episode of the Joy of NRTS podcast, brought to you by, well, I really don't know. In any case, here I am. Thank you for listening. Today's episode will be on healing in NRTS, how important it is, how one should seek to use it, and just generally advice related to healing. First things first, I think it's worth going over the fact that NRTS is a game with a relatively low economy to unit ratio, right? It's pretty difficult to produce a new unit in NRTS. Even in a late game where you might see 400 or 500 eco, the units that you're going to be trying to make, so artillery and heavy tanks namely, maybe a couple choppers here and there, you can't make much more than 4, maybe 5 at most if you are continuously producing. Choppers, of course, you can produce a little bit more. But in terms of tanks, even with 500 eco, you can only afford not even 3 of them a minute. All of that to say, they are quite expensive to produce. Of course, if you've got a wallet that's been building up for a while, you might be able to keep a couple vehicle depots constantly producing units. But just to keep in the back of your head, producing units is very difficult in NRTS. Losing them, on the other hand, is extraordinarily easy. You can lose an entire army of upgraded vehicles in less than 10 seconds if you take a particularly bad fight. So, damage compared to the ability to replace damaged units is a ridiculously skewed ratio in favor of damage. Producing units and building up an army while taking losses is extraordinarily difficult, which results in a lot of players in the early and mid-game sitting back and refusing to engage their opponents until they are at max. Okay, so hard to make new units. When you're fighting, you're going to be needing to be extraordinarily cautious. You'll see players spend a lot of their time and attention in NRTS on trying not to lose their units because, well, they're so hard to replace. Right, you lose a tank a minute, that's an extra 170 eco that you need to be putting towards replacing dead tanks that you could have been placing towards anything else. But so you see a lot of non-interaction in the mid game, and I think that's a bit of a shame, mainly because there is a tool in NRTS to help you keep your units fighting and stop you from losing as many units, namely the hospital. Sure, at first glance, $160 is a pretty steep price tag for a hospital, but considering that's less than the cost of 3 choppers, that is just slightly more than the cost of an upgraded production structure, that is less than the cost of 2 light tanks, I think you can afford it. The most striking competition for that money would be eco, namely housing, but we'll go into in a little bit why I think that's not as relevant. So, what do hospitals do? Well, they heal your units. That's great. That's pretty evident. They heal all of your units, even though it doesn't necessarily make sense for them to be able to heal choppers and tanks. They can, and they do so at a rate of 10 HP every 1.5 seconds. Those of you who are pretty good at math know that that means 400 HP per minute. If you are unfamiliar with the stats and HP values of different units in NRTS, I can give you some of the more relevant ones. Militia, 40 HP, choppers, 90 HP, anti-air artillery, 100 HP, medics, also 40 HP. You have heavy tanks at 150 HP. All of that to show that unit HP is on the normal, quite low. Militia, of course, are going to have lower HP than everything else. They're infantry, you kind of expect that. But even for your vehicles, if you're healing anti-air, you can heal up to 4 of them from the brink of death per minute with 1 hospital, which you can start to see when you ask yourself, okay, how much would I have to spend to replace, say, 4 anti-air? Or in the case of heavy tanks, 2 2/3 of a heavy tank. You know, how expensive is that? When you start crunching the numbers, you start to realize very quickly that hospitals are kind of insane for their monetary value in units you don't have to replace. Provided that, of course, you would have a damaged unit to be healing, which is one of the things about the hospital that limits it compared to regular eco, right? A farm's going to make you money no matter what. A house is going to make you money no matter what. A juggernaut, so long as it's fishing, makes you money no matter what. The hospital only generates value for you if you have damaged units to be healed, which means A, you have to stick some damage on them, and B, they can't be dead, right? If they lose all their HP, you can't heal it. They have to have some. So, provided that you can have damaged units that can benefit from the hospital can start generating rates of return that are up to and surpassing 3 times more efficient than level 1 farms, which already are a very efficient source of eco. Now, of course, there's a difference between undoing damage and putting money in your wallet, but the money that you save by repairing your units and still having them at full HP on the field after they've taken damage, in a way can be viewed as a generating of resources, right? You're doing something that would otherwise lose you money, and instead of losing any money, you no longer are missing HP on your units, and you didn't have to replace them. So, once we get into that, the hospital can start paying for itself. If it's healing like heavy tanks or especially artillery, the hospital can start paying for itself in just raw healing in about 20 seconds, which is ludicrous. Even if you're only healing, like, choppers are relatively cheap for their HP. If you're healing choppers, you're healing 1/9 of their value every 1.5 seconds. So, within 13 and a half seconds, you have made $64, which means that the hospital will pay for itself in just shy of a minute, which is already faster than a farm, which pays for itself in a minute 15. So, in healing choppers, you're generating insane value. By the way, the NRTS medic effectively is a fifth of a hospital. So to get 5 medics, it'll cost you a little bit more, cost you population as well, which can be a bit more constraining. But medics can move around, so there's that. But yeah, medics allow you to scale your hospitals further than just the 3 that you can already make, which, by the way, you should be making 3 hospitals at some point in your game, provided that you didn't just die in the mid-game. Hospitals are insane, but where was I going with this? Yes, the power of healing. So we've already established the insane amount of money that you can get from healing your units. Of course, that is provided you are constantly healing your units, which leads into a dynamic where, in order to profit the most from having a hospital, you need to be getting damage done with your units, not just taking damage on them, but getting good damage done on your units that your opponent will struggle to be able to afford, and also get your units out of danger to where they can heal up in the hospital and have some amount of damaged units at your hospital at all times. So perhaps one of the strengths of the medics, you can have them at the front lines, meaning that they are healing pretty much no matter where your army is, provided there is some unit with damage on it, and provided you're fighting the enemy, you're going to be taking damage in return. One scenario that I see in the mid-game a lot is, because choppers are very easy to use, and because they are extremely versatile, and also because you can guaranteed save them from everything save from enemy choppers, choppers are very durable. It's easy to get them out of harm's way whenever you decide to, because they're just faster than everything except enemy choppers. Right, so you poke them in, it's like, oh no, I accidentally got them on top of an enemy militia formation. I just click across the map and my choppers are safe. They've got damage on them, but they're safe. That sort of scenario, and just the dynamics of choppers being able to guarantee their survival, provided that there's any amount of attention given to them, allows choppers to benefit massively from hospitals, and allows hospitals to constantly be healing units. The power, I don't think I can stress this enough, the power of a hospital in the mid-game, with just choppers alone, is revolutionary, to the point where if you have a hospital and an air pad, and your opponents have just an air pad, the guy with a hospital will probably win, provided that he is taking reasonable fights with his choppers, right? If you're losing units, of course, then the hospital doesn't do you any good, but provided you're just poking here and there and getting a little bit of damage done, your hospital gets so much value so quickly, and Whereas if you didn't have the hospital, you poke forward, you get damage on your choppers, and then at the start of the next engagement they're involved in, they die. Instead of that, you poke in, get damage on your choppers, undo all of it. Now you have full HP choppers as though you had just built new ones. And so instead of every 2 engagements, you lose your chopper force. Every 2 engagements, you still have a completely fine chopper force, and also you are spending your money that you are no longer having to use to replace choppers on making new ones. So your Air Force, instead of oscillating with its use, right, you go and use your choppers, and then some of your low HP ones get picked off, and then your 3 chopper production out of a single air pad goes to replacing your losses. Instead of that, you just have 3 extra choppers are added to your Air Force every minute, and you're not losing any of them because you're healing the damage off at the hospital. That sort of the amount of pressure that you can start applying to your opponents when they don't have a hospital and you do is so great. I really don't have a better way to describe it than just revolutionary. If you haven't tried it before, I'm sure you've gone and used choppers in the mid game, whether it be out of a militia opener or just straight into choppers. If it's something like Valera, for example, where you really don't have much choice if you're like orange, red, or green on Valera, and you're just kind of stuck on an island. If you haven't tried it already, after you get your first house full of choppers, or maybe after the second house if you're a little scared to try something new. After the second house full of choppers, so you're at 14, maybe you're at 15 pop because you sold a worker, go ahead and drop that hospital, and sure, you'll be behind like 1, maybe 2 choppers from your opponents, but I promise you, the amount of damage that you can get away with now, because you can undo the consequences of it, it's just game-changing. You'll see with your own 2 eyes how insane a hospital can be when it's healing just choppers. And that effect gets magnified once you get upgraded vehicles on the field. Because upgraded vehicles are more expensive for their HP, every amount of HP that you heal off of an upgraded vehicle is more money. I think that's pretty important to note, right? Every HP on a chopper that you heal is $0.7, roughly. It's a little bit more than that, but $0.7 for healing 1 HP on a chopper, which means that every time that your hospital shoots a heal beam at a chopper, it's preventing you from losing $7, rather. It's not making you the money, per se, but it is preventing you from losing it, in terms of chopper HP. With a heavy tank, every HP is worth about $1.2. So every hospital beam that shoots a heavy tank is going to be $12. Every hospital beam that shoots an artillery, since artillery have 100 HP and cost $160, is 1.6, meaning that a hospital, again, healing 10 HP per tick, if it shoots an artillery, you are preventing you from losing $16 per hospital per tick. It is... You can start to do the math, and you wonder to yourself, okay, what's a good late game economy? And I said earlier, 400 or 500 eco is really good for a late game economy. And then you start asking yourself, how much economic damage am I preventing by placing a single hospital healing artillery, right? You are healing 400 HP a minute off of a unit that gives you $1.6 per HP you heal. I mean, $640 that you save in not having to replace artillery is ridiculous. Granted, artillery is just about the most expensive HP in the game. There aren't many other sources that are more so. So artillery is about the most valuable thing that you can be healing, but even healing tanks, right? Generating for yourself $480 you don't have to spend replacing tanks in just tank HP is already basically doubling your eco, provided you have 1 hospital. And again, you can place 3, and not just you, but also your teammates. So if you're playing a team game, right, it's not like each of you can have 400 something eco unless you own the entire map, because so much of it has to be in farms. If you're playing a 3v3, there is no reason there should not be 9 hospitals on the map. They are that crazy of a building. They are arguably more impactful to the course of a game than nuke silos, and I don't say that lightly. Nuke silos can just straight up end the game. Having hospitals while your opponent doesn't is it's just such a force multiplier. Such a force multiplier. You can undo so much damage. So I would implore you, if you think you can contribute nothing else to your team, make 3 hospitals anywhere. Make them anywhere. Preferably close enough to the front lines that they're usable without being shellable by artillery. But if you have to do it in the corner of the map, make the hospitals in the corner of the map. And oh, by the way, just a friendly reminder on that point that I said earlier, with every 5 medics healing as much as a hospital, a medic heals just about 81 HP a second, so it's a little bit more than 5 medics, or 5 medics heal a little bit more than a hospital, rather. But every 10 population that you sacrifice to medics is effectively yet another hospital on your team. Now, granted, if you're playing a 3v3 and you have 9 hospitals on the map, the demand for healing beyond that, I don't know how much extra value you're going to get out of making, say, 20 medics and sacking 40 population to that. In a 1v1, though, it's certainly tangible. The amount of heal per second that you get out of adding medics to your composition. So medics are very, very much worth your consideration for the late game. An army with upgraded vehicles and no medics almost always will start getting shoved around by an army with medics, simply because the one without it has to rely on hospitals for their healing, and if you have no healing, you just kind of get run over, as you just don't have the money to replace the tanks that will be lost because you don't have the ability to repair them without healing. Okay, so I have rambled on now for, it's probably going to be maybe 15 minutes after I cut this down. Okay, when do we want to get a hospital? So we've established that they're ridiculous, but obviously if the first thing you make in a game of NRTS is a hospital, you're probably not going to be on a great footing. Again, like in the early game, you're probably not going to see hospitals. They're just a little too out of your price range. Militia are relatively cheap to replace, so if you get damage done to them, it's not the end of the world. Making new farms is the biggest thing that you need to be doing in an early game, and making militia serves to keep your farms from being destroyed by enemy militia as much as it does serve to allow you to destroy enemy farms, thus giving you more farms to take. And I've just said farms a million times, and this word is no longer making any sort of sense to me. In any case, militia and farms are the meta of the early game. Until you've got a couple of houses down, it probably doesn't make sense to be considering a hospital. While you can also make a hospital before you've got any tier 1 units, read anything save for militia, right? Until you have those other units, the hospital can only be generating, what is that, about $2, $2.25 every time that it heals something, which is not nothing. It will pay for itself over time, but healing militia isn't as valuable as healing something else. Not to mention that there are things like light tanks which will one-shot your militia, meaning that from full HP they will still die immediately. In which case a damaged militia is going to fight just the same against light tanks as a full HP one, meaning that the hospital can be irrelevant in that case. I would generally recommend, in the mid-game, which I define as the part where you start making tier 1 units if you're going to make them, and or the part after you've made 4 houses, when you're starting to either full produce housing or considering housing as your main form of economy because you don't have many farms to be taken, you're starting to consider making static defenses because it's not so expensive to spend $25 on a tower anymore, right? In the early game, it can be a little cost prohibitive to do so, but in the mid game, towers are a little bit more relevant. As soon as you start getting things like towers on the map, hospitals are something that you can start considering because, put simply, it's not hard to destroy a tower in RTS. It's hard to destroy a tower and then still have a workable fighting force afterwards. Same thing with turrets, right? You can destroy a tower or turret on its own very easily, but you'll take damage in return, and that damage is not nothing. They deal a considerable amount. If you have a hospital on the map, again, that's over time, that gets repaired off for you, and so you can start to destroy enemy static defenses unless they're like doubling and tripling down. Only once you get to the point where there's like 2 turrets and like 3-4 towers guarding a choke, that's when you start needing artillery to push forward. Before then, having a hospital and some choppers can actually let you destroy enemy static defenses if they've only put 1, maybe 2 towers at a choke and or a turret. You can just run your choppers over there. They're all a little bit damaged. You go and set them on top of a hospital. They're back to full HP. You can do it with militia too. Militia you have to be a lot more careful with though, because a militia will die in 3 tower shots, as it will to turret shots as well. And I think turrets shoot a little faster than towers. I might be completely wrong on that. I really should test that. But you could do the same thing with militia. You just have to micro them a little bit more heavily so that you aren't losing them, because again, the hospital can only heal something if it's not dead. But recons, not the best at taking out static defenses, but again, they're fast enough that you can get in, get out. Even if you only deal half of a tower's worth of damage, and then you pull back, heal up, and then go do it again, you can kill a tower in 2 trips. And unless they have repairmen, which are extraordinarily niche and also very supply heavy, they're not out healing, or like they're not able to heal their buildings at all, so the damage you do sticks. Also with a hospital, if for whatever reason your opponent's leaving their command center relatively unguarded, you can start poking at the buildings that they put around there. Especially if they forgot to make a turret or tower around their command center, you can just start to poke at their housing, even if you're taking command center fire, because the command center doesn't deal all that much damage. It shoots fast, so it can pick off low HP units very quickly, but it takes a while to get them down there. And so a relatively undefended command center can have its housing and generators shelled at by infantry, by choppers, by tanks, by recons, right? So don't necessarily need to have artillery to get serious damage done on opponents' housing if they're skimping on defenses, provided you have a hospital and or some medics. Again, medics being able to heal at the front line is a pretty big deal. But okay, my recommendation: make a couple of those tier 1 units, whether it be choppers for you, whether it be light tanks, and honestly, militia light tank goes so hard, but like militia light tank AA as a sort of I'm going to kill you unless you start investing heavily in static defense, in which case you're not making more choppers, which means that I can just keep making more army. But like, as soon as you get a couple light tanks out on the field, you can just start cycling them back and forth to the hospital, or you can start medic production, and you can have tank, medic, militia, and while choppers can deal decent damage to militia, when the militia are also being healed by medics, they last a lot longer than you would expect. And so your sort of diet anti-air, so to speak, can really start to get damage done. But yeah, as soon as you have 2, 3, 4 of those tier 1 units, whatever they are, if you're going to use recons, probably have a couple more. If you're using jeeps, I'd say that's more of a tier 0.5 unit, because its main value is making your militia faster. But even jeeps can benefit pretty heavily from a hospital, as low jeep HP is one thing that can lead to having to disembark constantly, and then if you lose your jeep, your militia are slow, or you lose all your militia, so that's not really great. But having your jeeps at full HP after a skirmish for sure is a very valuable asset to have, instead of having to spend the $23 to replace them. Alright, so for sure, get some tier 1 units out on the map. Those are the units that you're going to generate the most value from with the hospital, and at that point, the hospital pays itself off faster than new farms. Maybe not, depending on the unit, right? Even healing less efficient sources, it's still going to pay itself off in terms of stuff you don't have to replace. It's going to pay itself off quicker than making more housing. Housing pays for itself in 4.5 minutes versus the hospital. Even healing militia, the hospital ends up getting itself paid off in, what's that, $90 a minute that you save and not having to make militia, which, by the way, you can't even make that many militia in a minute. Actually, yes, you can. No, you can't. You can only make 6 a minute. See, I don't even know what I'm talking about. I'm rambling on. But yeah, you can save more militia than you can make, which is pretty cool. But even if you're only healing militia, $9 for 40 HP, you're making, or not having to replace $90 of militia every minute, and the hospital only costs you $160, so you're paying for that in less than 2 minutes, which is just barely less efficient than taking new farms. Anyways, whenever you have enough units on the field that you can fight enemy tier 1 units, I guess is the right answer. You have enough units on the field to fight enemy tier 1 units, and also you have the capacity to keep low HP units alive, which mostly is going to revolve around you having those tier 1 units for defense, whether, again, tanks, choppers, recons, hell, even soldiers aren't even that bad because they can survive a single tank shot. Don't spam soldiers just to do it. it's a bad idea. Your teammates are going to get mad at you, but for whatever reason, if you decided that today's the day that I'm going to be the bane of everyone's existence, the hospital can get pretty good value out of healing soldiers as well. Okay. And I think now that I have rambled on a decent bit, as far as using hospitals in the late game, where do you want to place them? In the mid game, it almost doesn't matter. It does for sure, but it almost doesn't matter where your hospital goes, so long as it's a place that you can keep defended while also not losing your command center. So, towards the front line with your enemy, while also being... Maybe you don't even need it close to your command center per se, you just need to have a well-defended command center in addition to also having the hospital in a place where you don't lose it. Right, while it will pay for itself in terms of damage that you don't have to, or like units you don't have to replace, the hospital itself does not generate you money directly. And so if you're spending your money as you go, and you have something like 200 eco and your hospital dies, if you've been spending your money and you have 0 wallet, now you're waiting the majority of a minute in order to get another hospital up on the field and healing, which takes a while. And it will be a very noticeable dip in your ability to fight the enemy, especially if they are also making use of healing. So just beware. Make your hospital in a place that you are confident that you can keep defended. As far as positioning in the late game, similar rules apply, although once you get to a particularly late game, we're talking 45, 50 minutes, if you are at all still in this game, you've got units on the front line, you've got a lot of static defenses, you want the hospitals to be right behind your static defenses in a position where they aren't getting splashed by artillery as they're trying to poke you, but close enough that they can start to heal units if they pull back to the static defenses just a little bit. Now, you do need to be very careful, though. If you have units pulled back to your static defenses in a late game, that means that the enemy's artillery can strike your units, and that can very quickly overload your hospital's ability to heal. They can only heal 1 unit at a time, and artillery can splash many. And artillery does the same damage as a light tank, just for reference, except it does splash damage, so if you can imagine taking like 6-7 light tank shots for a single artillery hitting you in the units, right, it takes a while to heal that off. So just beware. Keep them close enough to the front lines that you can use them. Don't keep them so close to the front lines that they're going to be shelled at for free by the opponent. And also don't keep them so close to the front lines or so far away from the front lines, rather, that your units have to pull back to static defenses in order to get healed, because then, again, they get shelled by artillery, and then you can't heal anything because you're getting damaged much more than you can heal off. So, yeah, I suppose that's my idea on hospitals. Extraordinarily powerful. Again, I don't think I can state enough. If you're playing a 3v3, and we are beyond even the 25-minute mark, but especially if we're beyond the 30-minute mark, if you've been in the game the whole time, you've been playing, you should have 3 hospitals on the field, because that's an extra 1,200 HP a minute that we otherwise wouldn't be generating. And those are an extra 1,200 HP a minute in units that we won't have, provided that we are fighting our enemy. So, yeah, just a PSA, help your team. You should have, at minimum, 3,600 HP a minute of generation between you all. And to put that in perspective, how much HP does a heavy tank have? 150. Okay, so 3,600 HP is 24 heavy tanks a minute. In 60 seconds, that is 24 heavy tanks. If you want to break that down, that is saving yourself from losing a heavy tank every 3 seconds. Again, for reference, when you are maxed out in your economy, you're playing a late game, you haven't won the game yet, but you're like in full production, it is difficult to produce 3 tanks a minute. And what the hospital lets you do is preserve a tank every 3 seconds. Ridiculous, ridiculous, ridiculous. Place your hospitals. For the love of God, place your hospitals. And also, consider making medics, because again, 10 pop, extra hospital. And it moves. So, yeah, there's that. I'm going to start wrapping this up now. I thank you for listening to my rant. I hope that this has at least opened someone's eyes to the fact that hospitals and NRTS are the only dang things keeping the game dynamic and keeping it from becoming just a nuke race. Thank God for hospitals. If you did listen to this all the way through, I would like to thank you very much. I do appreciate it. If you're wondering what I'm drinking today, I have a Lipton Diet Green Tea mixed berry flavor. I decided that I probably should start drinking things that are less terribly sugary. I suppose aspartame isn't that much better, but it'll be fine. Anyways, if you have enjoyed, of course, likes and subscribes apparently do something useful. If you figure out what useful thing it is that they do, please feel free to tell me. I really don't know. Of course, there's also a link to the Discord in the description below. That is our NRTS community Discord. If you would like to discuss things like a game balance with other people who also wish this game got updated more than once a year. But I digress. Oh yeah, and we also have tournaments that we host there, so if you think you're better than me, then prove it. Anyways, again, thank you very much for listening. I really do appreciate it. I know you could be doing anything else with your time right now, and yet here you are with me. Anyways, I look forward to seeing you again in the next week sometime, and I know these aren't weekly uploads per se, but I like to at least not go 2 weeks without making one of these. Forgive me for my very lax scheduling, but life is life, or so they say. I will have another episode out next week. Have no idea what I'm going to talk about then, but I will talk about something that I find particularly interesting or important. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day, and while you're at it, have a great week too. You deserve it, you know. And until next time, stay classy.